Thank you so much for having us in. We're just going to start with introductions and then go from there. We'll start with Mandy and then Victoria and then Charisma and then Carrie. Just tell a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. Hello, everybody who's watching remotely from wherever you are in the world. My name is Mandy Moreland. I use she, her pronouns. And for those who can't see me, I'm a white woman with brown hair wearing a black shirt in front of my blurred out apartment background. I am currently the lead multiplayer VFX artist at the Coalition Studios, but have worked in level VFX and dabbled a little bit in cinematics, a little bit of everything. So happy to be here.
Perfect. Thank you. Victoria?
Hi, I'm Victoria Miller. I'm a senior producer with The Initiative, working on the new Perfect Dark. I am primarily working with narrative, UI, and level teams. And in the past, I've done both publishing and developer side production. So happy to be here.
Perfect. Okay, Charisma?
Hello, my name is Charisma Williams. I've been working in the game industry for a good, probably 14 years or so. So I've done everything from doing UI and UX on various games to shipping platforms such as Xbox platform. Also worked on Steam, which I know a lot of you guys probably play on PC as well. Right now, I'm currently a security PM at Microsoft, and my team is responsible for securing everything around Xbox, including all the studio services and platform.
Perfect. Thank you. And Carrie?
Hi, everybody. I'm Carrie Gaynor. I'm currently a UX design lead over at Turn 10 Studios, working on the Forza Motorsport franchise. I'm currently focused on accessibility and also live team. So we ask questions like, is this game usable by the widest audience possible? And is this fun for people? And what does the customer think about our title, usually before we release it even? So I'm just really happy to be here. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm wearing a striped shirt.
Perfect. And I am Tolu. I do recruiting. I've been in the gaming industry for about 7 or 8 years. Started off at EA, working with the Madden studios and the NBA studios, and then moved over to BioWare. And then started with Microsoft and primarily oversee 343 and Turn 10. Super excited to be here. So we're just going to open it up with, just questions for our panelists. But if you do have any questions, we cannot see y'all. But please let Jim know. We'll drop all of the questions in the chat. Perfect. And then we have Peter here. Peter, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't know I had a camera on. Hi, I'm Peter. I work for Xbox, Microsoft. It's a pleasure to be here. I know that Fiona on our team helped organize the panel. And thank you for being there to actually sit there and do the panel. So that is what I have. I worked on the Game Camp, a thing in NOLA as well, if you heard about that one. And I did with Melissa Boone and others.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll just start with this first question that I usually get, and I think it'll be interesting for y'all to answer, is to make it fun, what is your favorite game? I think everyone wants to know that. You're here for a reason. So let's start with Victoria. Tell me a little bit about your favorite game and why is your favorite game when you started playing, and then we'll just hear from everyone.
It's hard to choose a favorite game, but I will say I have some favorite genres. So when I was growing up, I was all about the RPGs. I was really into Final Fantasies. Starting from the first one on the SNES, I was playing all of those through to, I think, Final Fantasy VII. Of course, that's a lot of folks' favorite game. I'm really into narrative-based games in general. So games like Life is Strange or Tell Me Why. I've been playing Tell Me Why recently, so that's one of those. But I think my all-time favorite game was probably Civilization 3. And I must have spent hours of my life, days of my life, maybe even years of my life on that game. So.
Perfect. All right. What about you, Carrie?
So I think I also love playing narrative-driven games, but my favorite type of game is large open world, kind of like an epic, sometimes post-apocalyptic games. So one of the games that comes to mind, although it's hard to really choose one, is Fallout 4. I just really love all the branching storylines and the player choices that felt really significant. And that game had me up like all night for weeks straight. I think I put in like 500 to 1,000 hours into it because of the base building mechanic. I just loved, building things and just making it my own.
Perfect. Thank you. Charisma.
All-time favorite game, probably Mario Kart. I don't think anybody can touch Nintendo, and I think the sales prove it. It's too bad because they're really slow with content because they can make so much money selling that game over and over. And then the other one for me, probably Unreal Tournament, like 3, one of like the earlier ones. Like I spent so much time playing that with bots. Anything I can play with bots, I'm a big fan of. And currently, I'm actually playing Outriders with a buddy of mine back home. So we've been having a lot of fun playing that. So that's it for me. I think those are my top 2. Any genre I can like hop in and out relatively quickly, I tend to like a lot. So FPS games, fighting games, and racing games are probably my top genres.
Perfect. And then Mandy.
Yeah, I'm kind of a big fan of puzzler games. I like doing like figuring out puzzles and doing tasks and stuff like that. So a lot of the Zelda games, anything with like little mazes and doors you have to unlock and keys you have to get, all that sort of stuff is really satisfying. And then I like games where I can spend a lot of time just like existing in the game. So Breath of the Wild was huge. Even when I wasn't fighting anything, I was just running around getting mushrooms or something like that. Animal Crossing obviously has been big during the pandemic. And then one of the more recent games that I've replayed, which I don't actually frequently do, is both of the Ori games. I think I've played them both through a couple of times now just because they're gorgeous and just a ton of fun to play over again.
Perfect. And I'm definitely going to tell y'all my favorite game, but I wanted to also just have y'all think about the next question because I think it's going to be super important for the crowd to hear about like how you got into the gaming industry. Because we have people that are from middle school to college, and just hearing your story, I think would, put a little fuel in people's fires. So thinking that one through, and while you're thinking about that, my favorite game, because I know everyone cares, is definitely Madden. I'm a football girl. I live in Texas, so that's like the number one thing in life, like football. It's a thing. So I really love Madden. I love NBA Live. I love 2K. I think I personally I didn't really understand the beauty of games until I worked for BioWare, but I understood the mechanics of games, and I think 2K has a pretty good when I feel like I'm in the crowd, it does something. I always lose. FIFA is another one. I love FIFA. So any sports games are my thing. And then now that I support Forza, and coming from Need for Speed and now playing Forza, it's totally different. Just feeling like you're in the game. I think there's something about being in a parallel universe that I think Forza brings out, and it's a beautiful game. And they market to a crowd, and they're not worried about having the most players. They're worried about having the best type of content. And I love that about that group in general. So that's my spiel. Again, if you have any questions, please let Jim know. Drop them in the chat however you can, and we'll definitely answer them. But we'll go to the next question about how about your break into the gaming industry. So we'll start with Mandy first, and then we'll go to Victoria next.
Sure. I frequently tend to describe my journey into the gaming industry as I tripped and fell into this. I went to Florida State University, one of our state colleges in Florida, got my bachelor's in physics at the time. And by about my third year in that degree, I didn't like what I was doing, and I was really ready. I didn't want to do academia for the rest of my life. And I had dabbled a little bit in high school with art and had almost gone to a full art college in Kansas City, had decided against it. And so I started looking at avenues after undergrad that could get me into something that felt a little bit more like passion that I had a little bit more passionate about. And after undergrad, I applied to 2 colleges. I applied to a medical physics program because that was kind of like the obvious route for my physics degree. And then I applied to a digital production arts. It's like an MFA program in Clemson, South Carolina, like a little town in South Carolina. And visited the medical physics program first. It was interesting, not super exciting for me at least. And then I went to this other program that was doing things like modeling and special effects and green screen work and just all this really cool, inspiring stuff that kind of lit a fire in me. And so decided to go there. Took about 3 years getting my MFA. And then right after my MFA, I went and started working with DreamWorks in in San Francisco. And then, so I started out actually in film before I got into games. I was there for about 8-ish months, and then they consolidated their campuses and closed the one down in San Francisco. And very quickly, I got pinged by one of the recruiters at the coalition where I work, asking if I was interested in getting into games or not. And it actually wasn't an avenue that I had thought about a whole lot before, because and I think you'll hear this from a lot of people from film, they don't think they have the skills to get into games, because a lot of people think games is all about programming and engineering and all this sort of like hard technical stuff. But at least in the field that I'm in, there's a lot that has to do with art and color and shape and setting a scene and storytelling, all this different stuff. And so I had programming for my master's degree, a gumption to try something new, and so moved up here after 8 months in San Francisco. Started here in 2015, spring of 2015, and have kind of been here since. So that's my like stutter soft start into the industry here.
Perfect. That's great. Victoria?
Yeah, so I've been in the industry 15 years, so my start was way back in the day. But when I was going to college, even before that in high school, I was really into playing Diablo and then Diablo 2 when that came out. And I kind of fell in love with the idea that maybe I could do this as a career path as I was getting into college. And so I set out, I went to UC Berkeley. The intent was to major in computer science, because at the time I thought like really the only viable path for me was, as Mandy was saying earlier, like the programming side. And as it turns out, I played too much games and too much World of Warcraft, and my grades were not up to snuff for computer science. And I actually got really discouraged, and I was like, at Berkeley, when you're in the letters and science college, you had to apply to get into the computer science degree. I knew with my grades, it was competitive. I wouldn't make it. So I switched gears and was kind of like set aside that dream and was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to figure something else out. I ended up majoring in comparative literature. I studied Japanese and English literature. And when I graduated, I was looking at different internships in the Bay Area. And I happened to find one for a PR firm that specialized in PR for video game companies. And I was kind of like, is there still a chance that I can be working sort of adjacent to the game industry? So I applied for the internship, and I spent my last semester of college interning in the mornings 2 to 3 times a week, and then going to classes in the afternoons and obviously homework in the evenings. And then even after graduation, I continued the internship and was waiting tables at the Cheesecake Factory, at the Macy's in Union Square. And eventually the PR agency, they hired me full time. And from there, I was able to make a lot of different contacts in the game industry. And I found out about all these other different roles that were not just programming. And so through those contacts, I heard about an opening for a production assistant job at LucasArts. And so after a brief stint at the PR agency, I jumped over to production and found it was much more suited to my skills. And that was sort of how I got my break into the industry.
Fantastic. Do you still eat at the Cheesecake Factory now or no? No?
I don't know that I've been back since I worked there. Like I was working there for a while and eating their food far too frequently. So
Perfect. All right, Carrie.
So I actually started out on more of a graphic design and art path. When I was an undergrad, I actually studied communications design, and I didn't even know that, UX design roles existed or that it would be even possible to work in the video game industry. I grew up just loving games and playing them. I started out with the original, Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and I didn't think it was a possibility to, like, it was like my dream job. But I ended up going into more of like a print design set of roles, and worked on a lot of print and web, and noticed that a lot of things were moving more and more towards things in the digital realm, and advertising and materials, informational materials in the digital realm. So I went to graduate school actually to reconnect with that community, and really wanted to understand what design moving into this digital realm meant for my field, and wanted to keep up with the action. So I actually studied alternative design practice. We looked into things like serving underserved communities that traditionally, like, design may have turned its back on or done very little to address. So we were looking at things like, how can we use design to help trafficked victims, or how can we use design to address like urban change, and just bring certain things to light. And when I graduated, I had like this really large suite of like new skills, but I didn't maybe know exactly what to do with them. So I started out sort of as a UX generalist more at a firm that did like work for a lot of different clients. Like we did work with like Amazon and Samsung and Bang and Olufsen. And one of the clients that we actually worked with was Xbox. So it was really cool to get to work at or work with a client that was video game adjacent. And one day a job just kind of came up, and it was at Turn 10 Studios. And I didn't think I would get it. I just sort of was like, well, you miss 100% of the swings that you don't take. So, I was just like, I'm just going to, go for it and see what this is about. And I ended up landing that role, started out as a contractor, and luckily they let me stick around. And I've been there for the past 6 years working on UX. But I do want to sort of reiterate that there is no like one correct path or correct like grad experience to have where like that's going to be like the golden ticket to like getting into the industry. Like most of the people that I meet on the day to day, like they sort of I think someone mentioned that they accidentally fell into the field. Like a lot of people, I think that's kind of how it happened for them a little bit of happenstance for sure.
Beautiful. Okay. Charisma?
And now I get to be the opposite of Carrie, because I think my career is probably the golden ticket. Similar to Carrie, as soon as my dad brought home an NES, I was hooked. He said he brought it home for himself, but I never saw him play it. I think that's just what old people say. But I knew I wanted to make these things, but it was like impossible to know how to make them back in the day. So I figured my intro would probably be more on the marketing side. Like Carrie, I come from more of design, interactive design side. So sort of taught myself kind of the programming half of it. Went to college, got 2 degrees in 4 years, multimedia and graphic design. So I really felt like you couldn't do really good interactive design if you didn't have a solid like graphic design background. Like it just didn't work out well, at least what I saw from a lot of student projects. There's a certain foundation that graphic design really helped with, like with typography and art history and things like that, that really just helped really enhance anything interactive that you wanted to do. But after school, like most people, I went back home and there were no jobs, at least. I think it was around like the .com, like, big explosion. But I kept doing my web design stuff, picking up gigs, did like a website for like David Blaine, the magician, and a bunch of other stuff. did some stuff for Atari, and I really thought that my interest was going to be like on the marketing side. So I ended up actually meeting a guy on Yay Hooray, actually a design board, and he happened to work at High Voltage Studio, which is an independent studio outside of Chicago. And he got my portfolio, passed it around, and they brought me in actually as a web designer on the motion capture side. But I learned very quickly that when you get into gaming, it's kind of all hands on deck. So very quickly, the web design became a low priority, and I learned all about motion capture. And ended up, I think one of the first games I worked on was a game by Take-Two. It was a new franchise. They didn't know if it was going to work, and it ended up going on to be BioShock. So pretty awesome. But the nice thing is, like, once I got into the industry, I could see exactly where my skills made sense, and they made sense being on the UI UX team. So thinking like maybe like a year later, I ended up hopping over to that UI team, and then eventually realized, oh, all of gaming is out west. So moved out west and worked on Destroy All Humans for a bit with THQ, spent some time at Valve, Microsoft, and really accomplished more than I thought I ever would. Worked on multiple games across multiple platforms, worked on the platforms themselves as well. And it's been really awesome. One thing that's great about the gaming industry is there's just so many different areas that you can work in. So there's lots of different skill sets that are required across the business, across the products. There's always something to do. I'm someone that gets bored really easy. So it's been really nice to be able to kind of like decide, like, you know what, I want to do more of design stuff for a while. But if I want to do more of the technical stuff or more hybrid in between, there's always sort of a place for me to go and work in the industry and keep growing my skills.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to go to some of the questions in the chat real quick, and then like I said, if y'all have any more questions, please let Jim know. But we do have a question from Chicken Blee Soup. I don't know what the zeros. Okay. And they said, as a freshly graduated student working in animation, what steps can they take to be a competitive applicant for employers?
I can speak to this a little bit since I have some animation experience. I get this question quite a bit from students, and my possibly unsatisfying advice is, I try to encourage people not to put up your application as what you think that person is going to want, because with the caveat that if you do get the interview, you have to be able to defend whatever you are showing those people. You have to explain how you did it, and a lot of times interviewers are going to look for passion, or they're going to look for personality because they're hiring you, the person, to do work. And so often what I encourage for people is obviously look at the role that you want to get into and make sure that you're doing work that is suitable for that role, and you're presenting work that's suitable for that role. But make sure you include stuff that you find fun and that you find interesting and that you enjoyed working on, because the interviewer will know right away if you're just presenting some like really boring model that you did, or some code snippets that you wrote that you don't really care about, that you're only trying to do to like check the right box. And like my application for, I think part of my first demo reel was like 3D paper mache models I built of bugs back, and it was just this like summertime passion project I'd had, but I was really into it. And so I was able to talk about like shape and kind of like how I structured things and how I built things, and like it showed problem solving skills, and it showed passion and interest, and that's often a lot of what recruiters are looking for when they're looking to see if you're suitable for a role. So usually, yeah, if you're looking for something like what steps you can take or what to put on your demo reel or in your portfolio, obviously whatever is relevant for your job, make sure it's kind of like factored around that, but don't afraid to put a little bit of yourself into what you're showing as well.
Yes. Anyone else have anything to add to that?
I just have a question actually to go along with that, because for UX design portfolios, a lot of times we tend to look for process work and how you worked with your team, and like maybe what the initial preliminary sketches looked like and stuff like that. Is that something that in these portfolios that like animators would look for?
I think so. I mean, I know whenever we interview, at least for VFX work, I like to know how the person is going to be on the team, because I think especially in games, often the team size will fluctuate so much that you're often working in really close quarters with people that either maybe aren't on your team, or that it's you and one other person like really trying to like rapid fire figure things out. And so when we interview, we definitely ask about like the process of how you did things, and yes, definitely how you kind of worked with other people to solve things that maybe you didn't know how to do yourself.
Cool. Thanks.
Perfect. We'll move to the next question. This is a really good question as well. Squid the Ginger asks, do you have any suggestions on getting internships/jobs or any application or interview tips? I've been dreading trying to snag a job as I'm graduating this weekend. Happy graduation, Squid the Ginger. Super excited. I have a lot, but you can, Victoria, you can start it off.
Awesome. Yes, I was just going to say I can jump in on this. I think, when you're looking for internships and jobs, particularly when you're just starting out in the industry, don't be afraid to go and find smaller companies. Like if you're only applying to the big companies, you're, the small fish in a big pond, but look for the places where you can also be like the small fish in the small pond. I know, as I mentioned earlier, I got my start an internship. It was like a 10-person PR agency. It was very tiny, very small, but through that job, I was able to make lots of connections and eventually ended up at some of the bigger studios. So I think it's really important to make sure you're casting a wide net and not only targeting, the big companies that everybody's heard of. There's a lot of really cool companies out there doing interesting VR experiences, mobile games, like it runs the gamut. And as far as tips for interviewing, kind of along the lines of what Mandy and Carrie were already speaking about, I know from the production side, we're always looking to make sure folks are focused on teamwork, because making games is a team endeavor, and your ability to work with others, be able to take feedback, all of that stuff kind of demonstrates how well you'll be able to fit in with particularly some of the larger productions and whatnot. So we're always looking for folks that can stress collaboration, that stress working with others and problem solving with others. And, all of that can help in the interview process.
Perfect. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was going to say like networking is really, really key. Look and see if there's like local events going on where you live, so that you can actually meet people and talk to them. Even some of like I know there's like virtual like sort of meetups and stuff that go on as well. I mean, if you listen closely to my story, like I really got my break literally meeting someone on an online message board who happened to be the lead UI person at a local game studio, and like just asking him like feedback on my portfolio and my work, and he was super happy to give me that feedback, and instead noticed that I looked pretty good and actually referred me to the mocap director. So definitely look to connect to people. I think you guys are super lucky. You've got like so many tools like LinkedIn. There was no LinkedIn for me when I first started. So I was like trying to hack people's emails, like if I knew a recruiter's email from like EA, I tried to follow the pattern to figure out other people's emails to just see if I could ask them some questions, and it actually worked. Like I ended up actually emailing a concept artist at Blizzard at the time, because I didn't know like where I would fit in at gaming, and I was just curious how their day-to-day went. And that person not only emailed me back, but had like a 40-minute phone call with me and talked to me about how they got into the industry, what concept artists do from day to day. So I'll say one thing about the industry is like everyone is like really, really approachable compared to other industries. So if you're on LinkedIn, you can definitely, send a note, reach out, ask for feedback, and work from there. Another thing you can do at LinkedIn as well is if you want to work at that like top company that's kind of hard to get into, if you look at LinkedIn, it'll tell you sort of like where most people came from that currently work at that company. And so I remember actually kind of backtracking. So you can kind of end up following like like the backtrack and see where people kind of started and maybe target some of those smaller companies that a lot of the bigger companies actually love getting talent from. It's a great way to sort of like angle yourself towards some of those like more competitive companies.
I think piggybacking off of what Charisma's saying, going to networking events like job fairs or just coffee meetups and stuff like that, especially now where a lot of things have gone virtual. I think it has actually made it a little bit easier for a lot of introverts like myself to get out there and meet people and make those connections because it's a little bit less nerve-wracking than being in a crowded physical room with like people around. So yeah, like take advantage while you can of all these virtual meetups and just virtual coffee chats and stuff like that.
Perfect. And to wrap that up, I would definitely say the one thing that I think a lot of people forget is understanding that just as much as someone's interviewing you, you should be interviewing them as well. Not everyone is built or should want to work at an EA, and Microsoft, or Blizzard. Like that's not everyone's calling, and that's okay. So I think that it's making sure that you're interviewing a company just as much as they're interviewing you, because job PTSD is a real thing, especially your first job out of college. If you go somewhere where it's not a fit, it will teach you life lessons, but it takes a while to bounce back. So just keeping that top of mind, staying true to your fundamentals and your morals and what makes you happy, and making sure that you're finding that wherever you're interviewing. Also, just being true to your skill sets. I've seen this happen a lot. I used to be part of the new grad talent program at EA. I've seen people come in and hype their resume up or hype their skills up or hype what they can do up, and then they come in and they don't perform. And it's okay to not be a subject matter expert at all these things. So be true and letting people know during the interview process, I'm interviewing here because of X, Y, and Z. Here's what I want to gain. Because you want to make sure that wherever you're interviewing, you're set up for success as well. And then the last thing I would say is do your research. I think we talked about this earlier, and it took me a while to understand this. There's so much in gaming. Like we think about like the actual game itself and like working on a game. We don't think about the platform side. We don't think about the marketing side. We don't think about the security side. Like there's so many things that you can do. And if you really look at your skill sets, especially coming from USC, one of the top gaming program and one of the top schools, like there's just so many things that you can do. So I would explore that in yourself and then kind of make sure that you are targeting those type of roles that set you up for success long term. That's my recommendation for you. But you're graduating this weekend, and that's an accomplishment in itself. So I know that the dread and graduation and all of that is real things. But right now, especially in the day and age that we are, graduating is just even an accomplishment. So you should give yourself, what's your name, Ginger, Squid the Ginger, a pat on the back because you did it. And I'm proud of you. So,
woo!
I'm super excited. Okay, cool. So we'll move to the next question, which I received, which is kind of fun. What part, we're all different types of people. We all have different backgrounds, but what part of your personality and what part of just who you are do you bring to your job? So you might take a second to think about it, and then we can go around, starting with Carrie, because you're unmuted, so I'm guessing you already know. So go, girl.
I am ready to answer this question. I think it's actually important to have a good sense of humor at work. It's, I think good to be easygoing and know when to go with the flow and know when to sort of put your foot down and be able to say no to certain things or question certain things. That's why they hired you, for your, expert opinion. But overall, I've found that everybody that works in games has a really excellent sense of humor. So it's been good, I think, for just communicating back and forth with each other and for creating some of those social pathways that help you kind of get the ball rolling on certain conversations.
Perfect. Charisma?
Yes. For me, it's probably my curiosity. Like I'm super curious about just how things are done. Ever since I first got on the internet, I was like, okay, how's this happening? Let me go figure it out. So bringing a sense of like curiosity to the gaming industry, I think has really been beneficial to me, because it's allowed me to like not only figure out just how things are working, but once I figure out how things are working, I've spent a lot of my career like streamlining those things so that, the creative team can spend more time on being creative and not doing like really repetitive tasks and things of that nature. So like really like being curious about how different aspects of game development work and come together. For me, I'm really valuable because I'm able to bridge a lot of disciplines because I'm curious about all those disciplines. So it's really nice to be able to like understand, how to talk to an engineer because you've done some engineering before, and just understanding that there's all these different disciplines and they all have their different sort of concerns. But if you're really curious, you'll get along great with everyone because you'll be super curious about what their day-to-day looks like and how you can make sure that you're improving their day-to-day as well as improving your kind of core disciplines day-to-day as well. So I would definitely say curiosity has been huge for me in the industry.
Perfect. Okay. Mandy or Victoria, do y'all want to add anything?
I can jump in. For me, it's I'm actually going to say two things. The first is the ability to be calm under pressure. As a producer, like everyone's throwing their problems at you, so it's important just to be able to take it in, think about it, help the team feel comfortable, feel like they're being supported, and then go solve their problems for them, essentially. But part of that is also analysis, and I always enjoy analyzing things and learning more and discovering like how things work, why they're working the way they are, and it's really useful because in a large scale production, the problems are usually just symptoms, and you need to be able to dig deep and kind of follow the threads and figure out what the more strategic or high level problems are, and then how do you fix those, and then fixing that higher level thing is going to solve 20 issues that were happening downstream. So that ability to really like look at something and then say like, okay, analyze what that is, think deeper about it. Is this really the issue? Is it something else?
Perfect. That's great. And then Mandy?
Yeah, I think one of the skills that I've found, there's not really like a quippy name for it, but I really value when people can admit when they don't know a thing. And it's I call it a skill that I've built because it actually takes a lot of work to be comfortable in that unknowing stage and admitting that you don't know how to do a thing. But I found that such a valuable skill to have because, for one, making games is such a collaborative experience that it's more likely than not that you're just going to be faced with a bunch of problems you don't know how to do. That's why they hired you, is to figure out how to do those things. And so if you can kind of embrace the idea that you don't know how to do a thing and then be comfortable seeking help to do that thing, then you will be a better, more collaborative kind of developer. And I think this goes across, I see all these heads nodding. I'm assuming this branches out to all different departments of like being able to know when you know your limits and know when you don't know how to do a thing, and then learn how to kind of reach out and solve that thing. If that means working with another person, if that means learning how to look something up, if that means learning how to like just figure it out yourself, there's all different avenues. But a skill that I've intentionally developed, and one that I always try and encourage to other people, is this ability to like admit when you don't know a thing, or when you're unsure about something, and then confidently move on from there.
Perfect. I'm going to loop back to Carrie, who wants to add more.
Yes, I just wanted to add one last thing that I thought of. I think that one other trait that I tend to bring to the table is empathy, and I try to do as many like sort of activities with my team as possible that help promote empathy within them. Because one thing that I learned through being like a UX designer in gaming is that not all of your players are like you, and not all of your players will game like you. So a valuable thing to have, I think, is empathy for how other people play games. And as someone else said, an intellectual curiosity, I think that's absolutely on point as well. So being able to realize that Others, whether it's by like gender or an ability set, or they're in like a different persona set from you, others will be trying to enjoy your game as well. So it's important to understand that. And that's all I wanted to add. Yeah.
Perfect. I definitely want to add, but I want to go ahead and just talk about the next question so we can think this through. On the contrary, if you could turn back time, what would you have done differently to launch your gaming career? And it's okay if there's nothing, but just think that one through. And I want to answer as far as like bringing what part of my personality I bring. I think that most people can tell I'm super, I'm all about seeing like everyone's potential. Like that's super important to me. Working at EA, one of our pillars was being human first. And I think sometimes we forget, like Carrie said, the empathy of things and like understanding that gaming or not, everyone has a story, everyone has a testimony, everyone has something. And it may not align. You may not agree with someone based on X, Y, and Z, but I think that being empathetic and then also just being true to yourself is super important. That's why I tell everyone I speak to, every class I speak to, make sure that you're interviewing these companies just like they're interviewing you, because the last thing you want to do is in a society where we're putting on different masks everywhere we go, whether that's to our friend's house, to the grocery store, I think that you spend a lot of time at work and you want to be true to yourself. So I think that like being human first and being true to yourself like will literally make work so much fun, especially in the gaming, because gaming is so creative. You're going to meet so many different people, so many different backgrounds, so many people that grew up differently than you, have so many different tastes than you. And especially like when I think about it now, I started Microsoft during the pandemic. So like now, like Zoom is all we have. Zoom, Teams, Skype became my bestie. So like even having to like get to know someone that lives across the world and understanding their background and communicating with them and being empathetic and understanding that a kid might walk up to the camera and that's okay, or they may not want to turn on their camera and that is okay, or they may be direct and that is okay, or they may want to talk about life before and that is okay. And that's what I told like every hiring manager, every person, like it's okay to just be okay. And that's my little spiel. Okay, perfect. So go ahead and move on to the next question. Turning back into time, what would you have changed? We can start with Carrie. I always start with you just because you're already unmuted. So go
on. So I think probably I would try to be more fearless and just be less afraid of like, I guess like looking stupid or being afraid of asking too many questions. And really, I wish that for like a lot of women and minorities in gaming, I wish that we were all a little bit just easier on ourselves, and that it was, easier for people to, say no and learn the lessons earlier on in their careers. But yeah, I think I wish that, earlier on I was a little bit braver and also quicker to be my authentic self at work. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Talking to myself. That was great. Okay, Charisma.
Yeah, I think for me, like, I wouldn't change anything. When I graduated, I was super close to landing a job at Sony Online. Like, they actually flew me out and everything. And it was like between me and one other person, and I ended up not getting it. But I stayed in touch with like the hiring manager, which was like the art director at the time. And he ended up giving me some freelance work anyway. So it's like I still got to put Sony down as a client. And I think going to High Voltage as a first job, I think a lot of people talked about this earlier, was just like the perfect fit for me. Smaller studio, but a studio that did so many different things and worked on a ton of licensed IPs. Like we were doing Family Guy, Ghost Recon, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Like I told you guys about the BioShock stuff. I got to work with Alex Seropian because at the time he had just come back to Chicago. Like a lot of people probably don't realize that Bungie actually started out in Chicago, my city, one of the best cities ever. So he actually had just come back and started his new studio. So I got to work on Stubbs the Zombie and spent a ton of time with him. Very creative, super awesome guy. And I didn't even know like what mocap was. So I definitely would skip it, but it just goes to show that sometimes you won't get what you're aiming for. But in hindsight, when you look back at it, you'll be like, wow, I'm kind of happy I didn't end up like out in California for my first job. It may have been just a bit much at that time. And it's kind of made more sense for me to still be at home, still be around my friends, and get the opportunity to sort of explore. Smaller studios, it's much easier for you to explore different disciplines and sort of, reach over and dip your toes into different things versus like a bigger studio. So once I understood exactly where I wanted to be, then moving out west, it was just like a much smoother transition. So no regrets. I think in hindsight, like things sort of worked out, and the industry is super small. The person who kind of brought me into high voltage, he's now 343 Halo's UI lead. So it's kind of funny seeing my old boss right here. So you eventually run into everybody again. So definitely no regrets.
Perfect. Thank you. Mandy?
Yeah, it's sort of similar to what others have said. I don't tend to live with regret or shame or anything like that. So there's not so much that I want to change or would change about it. But I think one of the skills or one of the things I've been working on more recently, and I know a lot of people struggle with it, is the fear of trying something new because you're not going to get it perfect the first time. And I think that holds back a lot of people. I know it used to hold me back quite a bit. And it would be over like hobbies, like like knitting. Like I was afraid to start trying to knit because I was like, I can't make, this beautiful sweater or something on the first try. And I think it actually held me back from trying for different opportunities in the beginning. Because I like looking back on things now, I think I held back on things that unless I knew that they were like, I was a guaranteed in, like someone had already kind of told me that like, yes, you're great, you can definitely do this. Like, we're really interested in you. Or I like I knew someone who knew, like unless I had some kind of guarantees of what I was trying for, I kind of held back from doing different things. And this again goes hand in hand with the like being able to admit when you don't know how to do a thing. But I think acknowledging that it's okay, even if you don't do it great or if you don't succeed at the thing, was like life changing. And it sounds so simple, but it's really hard to kind of grasp out of this idea that like if you, a lot of times the like sentiment is like, you don't know if you'll succeed unless you try, but they kind of fail the like, and it's okay if you don't succeed still, like so long as you tried. And so embracing that, and like, I wish I could have embraced that a little bit earlier, this idea that it's okay to try things. It's okay to not succeed at those things, but you won't know unless you actually try to do those things.
Perfect. And we'll go to Victoria, but before we do that, we have 10 more minutes. So if you have any last minute questions, please tell Jim so that we can get them answered before we close. But okay, Victoria.
So for me, I don't have a lot of regrets, but I would have advice for my younger self. And that is, and it speaks to a lot of the points that the other folks here have already spoken about, but essentially it's, if something's not working, it's not failure and it's okay. So for me, one of my early career studios I worked at, the job was my first time doing internal development. I had been publisher side up till that point. And I just had a really hard time in the job. It was never really clicking. And I thought like, oh, internal development is not for me. This is not what I like. I need to stick to publishing side now. And I have since come back to internal development. And only in hindsight do I realize it wasn't the job, that type of job, that was the issue. It was really more about the team fit in the studio I was at. And it wasn't working for me, and it was okay. But I kind of gave up on it and gave up on that whole sector of production because I incorrectly assumed that I was the problem, and that the job was, it was something wrong with me essentially, and that I wasn't good at internal production, and that wasn't my thing. So I guess my point is that it's okay if things aren't a good fit, and there's so many different roles in games, even within disciplines, like tons of different types of environment artists, tons of different types of engineers. So, there's studios all over the place. Like if you ever feel like you're not fitting in, go find a different studio, go find a slightly different function in the job, because I think the games industry can make space and has space for everyone. And so essentially, like, don't give up.
Can I add to that just a little quick thing? So I think as well, it's good to know that your role isn't infinite. That your role can change. And so even if you're in that role for a little while and you find after a time it doesn't fit you anymore, like Vicky was saying, there's a million different roles you can go into in the games. And so you are going to evolve as time moves on, and your role can also change. So there's often this fear that, like, okay, if I get my job, am I stuck with this job for the rest of my life? And that's totally not true. Everything is changing, hardware is changing, technology is changing, desires are changing. And so your role within the industry can also kind of grow and change with you and everything else with it. So
Perfect. And I think for me, I know, like, it wasn't until when I graduated out of college, it wasn't like 3 years later, morbid, my father passed away unexpectedly. And I remember at that point in my life, I was existing but not living. And that is like one thing that I'm super passionate about. And I think Mandy said it really well. Like, your role can change, but also you can change. And I think that it's important to understand, if you get into gaming and say you don't like it, that is okay. Some people don't like the crunch. Some people don't like the grind. Some people don't like X, Y, and Z, and that is okay. I just encourage everyone, like, as you're stepping into this part of your life, and it may not be your first job. There's people in middle school, there's people in high school on this call. It's just making sure that everything that you're doing, that you are living and not just existing, because I think that we can be okay, like, with just being stagnant. And each of y'all have a potential, each of y'all have a gift, and I encourage everyone to, like, really look into that. Your gift may not be the same as your brother, your sister, your spouse, whatever, but it is your gift, and tap into it and decide, like, if your gift is, relationship building. Do you want to go into production? Do you want to go into product management? Do you want to go into recruitment? Like, there's just so many things that you can do with your gift. If it's art, what does that look like for you? There's so many plethoras of art. There's technical art, there's concept art, there's environmental art, there's VFX, there's animation. There's also, like, arts and different scopes of things. There's in marketing. If you're in tech, you can mix art with tech. You can mix design with tech. Like, there's just so many things that you can do. But don't be, subject to just one thing, is my advice. So we have one more question, because we have 5 more minutes. I think this will be a good way to wrap things up. And I know that each of y'all touched on this already, but if you could just give advice to anyone on this call that we cannot see, what would it be? To just advice in general. It can be anything, period. So we'll start with my friend Carrie first, and then
I'm ready this time. I'm ready. So I think my one piece of advice, as maybe trite as this sounds, it is still just as true. I think try to be your authentic self, and bring that every day to the table. And if you can, and if you feel comfortable, try to bring that to the workplace. I think diversity really attracts more diversity, and that's the only way that we're going to create any change in the industry, and make people realize, like, yes, like, there are, women in gaming, there are certain ethnicities in gaming, there, just gaming is for everybody. So it's not just for one particular demographic to enjoy. And the only way we get any of that visibility is if you are yourself.
Beautiful. Thank you. Charisma?
My overall advice is honestly, like, keep your options open. I think the biggest mistake I see a lot of people do is they're so narrow in what they're seeking. But like even right now, there are tons of industries that look for skill sets that come along with game development, especially like in the AR and VR industries. Like they need people who know how to work with game engines because game engines don't just build games nowadays. They build all sorts of things. I saw job listings the other day for Tesla. They were looking for game designers. So really try to like keep your perspective wide. If you have game developing skills, you don't have to feel like you have to necessarily target a specific company within the game industry. There are a lot of companies that sort of straddle that line and do a little bit of both. Facebook has a gaming department. They also do Oculus VR and they do a lot of gaming stuff around that. So just know that your skills are very much in demand. And don't get discouraged. We've all gotten like tons of rejections from tons of places. Just keep on, applying. And like I said, broaden up where you're looking because the sooner you can apply your skills and work with a team, those skills that you build when you work together with other people, it's going to help you move one step closer to, maybe working on that game that you want to work on.
Thank you. Mandy?
Yeah, I think my advice kind of runs parallel to what Carrie was saying. And it's this motto that I have of stay strange. I think especially for like underrepresented groups, you're kind of encouraged as you're growing up and as you're getting into all different fields to kind of homogenize yourself with what everybody else considers to be the standard or the normal. And it's an act of rebellion to kind of push against that and be the weird kid, be the strange person, keep your weird, strange hobbies because those things, one can be amazing skills that you can bring in. And it, like Carrie was saying, it really diversifies the group and it keeps you more authentic to who you are because the more you try and like smooth yourself out to be whatever someone else expects you to be, then like the less interesting and less bright and less colorful that you're going to end up being. So and I think this especially goes out for anybody who's in like the middle school, high school range that's in the group right now. Like I like emphatically encourage you to stay strange, like if you're passionate about sewing or cosplay or something like that, like hold on to that and really like embrace it and kind of be yourself and the industry will embrace you as you come into it with that.
Thank you. And Victoria?
Yeah, my piece of advice is to advocate for yourself. You are your best advocate, and it'll only help you as the years go by. And if you continue to do it, and you'll be able, that's the way you can meet your goals and succeed. So.
Perfect. That was super great. We are at time, and I want to be cognizant of that. So thank y'all so much for having us. Thanks all the panelists for everything all the guidance, all the wisdom, everything that you gave to the crowd. And feel free to add any of us on LinkedIn. If you have questions, if you need anything, if you want someone to look at your portfolio, if you want interview tips, whatever that may be, please add us. We definitely want to help you and see you through your journey. We may not be able to get you a job. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. But we want to at least contribute to your success. And I know that people have questions. So feel free to add any of us and we'll respond.